You're going live. And we're probably live now. So tonight we're going to talk about the question that we're going to start with is capitalism obsolete? Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about capitalism. The question that we're going to start with is capitalism obsolete? What are you guys' initial thoughts on the topic?
So the question already has kind of, I guess, a couple assumptions baked in. So we have capitalism right now, right? Mm-hmm. There's pros, there's cons. Some things are going well, some things are not going well. So when we say, is it obsolete? There's kind of already an underlying assumption that there is something about it that that used to apply, but that no longer applies. So my question is, what is that thing? I guess it's kind of a question for whoever posed the question, right? Like, what is it about?
Which I guess would be me. So I actually really like that. That's a good observation. That's a very smart observation. And I think it's a good way to start the conversation. I guess so that is a very good way to put it. I would say essentially capitalism was designed and started to come into place really with the expansion of European civilizations, colonialism, and then it became the really kind of like similar to what we have today in the 20th century. But the reason I pose the question that way is, well, first of all, because I think it's a little bit of a provoking way of approaching the conversation, but also, yeah, I do think that the fact that we have so much inequality and that inequality continues to grow, and that seems to be a process that is, what's the word, exponential. That seems to indicate that maybe there is a problem in the system if we're talking not just right now or in a couple of decades from now, but if it's sustainable throughout the 21st century and beyond, right? Or if that model, in fact, needs to be adjusted.
So it's kind of related to the income gap. You're saying that.
Well, maybe that would be from my perspective, that would be something that is a problem with the system that is kind of glaring, but it doesn't mean that I think it's the only problem. But and mind you, I don't think capitalism is the worst thing in the world. You know, I think it has worked a whole lot better than, for example, when they tried to do communism in the 20th century. But I do think that certainly income inequality has become a considerable problem, and I do think there are other imperfections, and I do think that personally, from my point of view, it will be a discussion in the 21st century, and we probably need to be talking about what works and what doesn't work, and also understand that there are challenges. Another big problem is climate change. That we're just talking about that before we start recording, right? So I'm not really so sure capitalism without modifications can really work if we're destroying the planet the way we're destroying the planet right now. So that's another problem. So yeah, I mean, those are just some of my views of things that might be wrong with it.
I'm confused. I don't know that it seems to me that when you have people who operate businesses that contribute to climate change, that's not necessarily a problem with capitalism, it's a problem with regulation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I don't know if it's a problem. I mean, I think you're raising a good question, right? Is it a problem with the system of capitalism, or is it a problem with the way capitalism is being implemented?
Right.
A little bit. And I don't know. It's we have 2 hours to discuss it, and an hour and a half, 2 hours to discuss it, and maybe we can figure it out a little bit.
Bruno, we can hear your audio, but your video is frozen.
Frozen.
At least on my end. But yeah.
Oh, there. You're
Not
good.
how the video just been froze. But yeah, we can hear. We just heard everything you said, so yeah, it's fine. So yeah, it's interesting. So David said like maybe it's a problem with regulation, not with capitalism. So yeah, I guess maybe it's a political. Maybe it's an issue that the people with the most amount of wealth have an unfair influence on the political system. There's a couple different angles we could take with this, right? We could say, there's a couple different things we could discuss. We could discuss the influence that the rich have on the political elite. We could discuss income inequality. We could discuss, climate change. Yeah, there's a couple different directions. So I'm open to whichever direction you guys want.
I understand what you're saying, and I think income inequality is a very serious problem, and we need to do something about it. I guess I'm just not seeing fully the connection between capitalism as a economic system that is causing that. Maybe the way people are doing it causes that. I mean, a CEO is not worth 800 or 900 times an employee, So I agree that income inequality is a problem. Where I have a disconnect is that a result of capitalism or something else?
Right. Yeah. Well, let me try to give an example. Maybe that might be a point of discussion. When what's his name? Standard Oil. Who's the guy? Rockefeller amassed so much power and so much economic power and political power, right? And when U.S. Steel became a very dominant monopolist, the federal government was able to dismantle these monopolies. They were able to break up Standard Oil and U.S. Steel, and there was no real effective opposition to the courts and to legislation to dismantle all the monopoly power then during the early 20th century. Now I think what happened was that the industrialists got wise to this, and they figured we are going to, at least my conspiratorial point of view is, we are going to promote theories that justify monopoly. And so it became a lot harder after that, and I'm pointing to conservative economic doctrines, mainly coming from the University of Chicago, who just really gave them the intellectual ammunition to be able to say, no, it's actually good for the economy to have these large monopolists, very powerful corporations, or at least if it's not good, it's not bad, because they came up with this doctrine that as long as it doesn't hurt the consumer, we should be fine with that. And so this sort of thinking has permeated, for example, the economics discipline, and basically the conventional thinking. And so it has been much harder to tackle monopolies. And as we all know, economic power leads to political power, leads to more economic power. And I think that's where our system of capitalism in the United States is trapped right now. And it's basically a matter of power. And it's very hard to organize the countervailing forces to sort of resist this trend, and a lot of it is saying, yeah, it's basically it's already been sort of put under the thing I think most people, the label uses billionaires. The billionaires are basically hacking the economy. They're twisting it. They're changing the rules to favor them, and that I think is a reasonable take on what has been going on.
Yeah, you brought up, there's a bunch of different topics. There's monopolies, and then there's just should billionaires exist in general. And then there's the topic of do they have too much political influence? And then there's the topic David brought up, which is capitalism causing income inequality or is something else causing it? So we have a whole bunch of things going on here. So yeah, do we have any sort of what's our sort of so Raul, you brought up Bill, you brought up really rich people having a disproportionate influence on the political system. I find that to be an interesting topic.
Yeah.
Is that like I guess where do you guys want to go with it with the discussion?
Well, I think well, to be honest, Michael, I don't know. But I in regards to what Raul said, I think that's something that is interesting. It's an interesting point that he's raising, right? That I don't know if it's the best way the conversation, but it's certainly an interesting point. The fact that maybe if the balance of power has changed, right? Maybe the system doesn't work like it used to. I think that's an interesting notion, and it does seem to be the case. Because when you compare, well, what was the golden age of the American civilization and economic system? It was mid-century,
right?
When America was at its strongest, and it was the economy was very, very strong, and it was rebuilding Europe, helping to rebuild the world, essentially, after the most destructive conflict probably in the history of mankind. And things, but we're talking about Roosevelt, the Roosevelt era. We're talking about an era that is very different from the era that we have now. All of those mechanisms that were put in place to make things work have been in fact dismantled at this point. And I mean, Raul, he has much better economic understanding than I do in economic training, but I mean, anyone who's read a little bit knows that a lot of those mechanisms have been dismantled, and if they have been dismantled, it just it stands to reason that things may not work in the same way, and in fact work much not as good, or much worse, in fact, one can say.
What mechanisms?
Well, like what Raul just said, I mean, I'm sure he'll be able to explain a lot better. But the monopoly thing is one
antitrust legislation and enforcement, for one thing.
So the Sherman Antitrust Act is not adequate anymore?
No, I don't think so. There is a burgeoning school of thought now coming out, and it's hopefully it will flourish, and it basically saying that what the Chicago School of Antitrust is saying is all wet, and it's a very systematic sort of disposition or exposition, of what's wrong with it. That because I, not to sound like redundant, but the Chicago School is basically saying if it doesn't hurt the consumer, we should be fine with it, whatever happens in the with respect to monopolies and things like that. But I think that's a very short-term point of view. It might not hurt the consumer now, like people are saying, well, what's the problem with Amazon? Their stuff is cheap. Yeah, it's cheap, but guess what happens when they kill all their competition? And anyway, it's just been, you know, and we know it. Nobody went to jail from the 2008 banking crisis, right?
So that's separate from monopolies, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's
I know.
another good topic. But
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Not just monopolies, but in terms of enforcement of you know, legislation that's related to the economic system. Iceland sent a few bankers to jail, but nobody went to jail here in the States. No.
Yeah, that's one thing. So yeah, we're going in many different directions, but as far as financial products go, I would be in favor of legislation requiring that they be simpler, or like, because a lot of the financial crisis was you had such complicated financial arrangements. Like, if this happens, I pay you this, but if this goes up this much, then I pay you this, and it was so complicated that they had all these mathematical models that would sort of misstate the risk or weren't really representative of it. And that's what they would show to regulators as the risk they were taking, when in fact the risk they were taking was a lot more. So that's kind of a separate topic that I find interesting. But
well, I think it's part and parcel of the whole system of, yes, go ahead, David, sorry.
No, I'm just thinking, I'm having trouble separating some things out in this discussion, because I have no doubt that money has way too much influence in politics. But is that because of capitalism or because of money?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know. I'm getting lost.
Right. I think you're saying, is it if capitalism is allowed to work properly, would we have a problem with it, or is the problem that whoever, and right now we're thinking the extremely wealthy people who are able to amass power, is it because of that capitalism is being sort of hacked or perverted to serve their ends?
Well, also, you know, the relationship between money and political office is it is too often a revolving door between elected office and lobbyists. And is that, I have a problem with that, but is that problem with capitalism, or is the problem with that revolving door?
and then there's the question: is that revolving door inevitable, or is there a way? Yeah. But yeah.
Well, go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna bring up, like, so you guys know about like donations to political campaigns and like FCC versus Citizens United. My understanding is that corporations can give as much as they want to support a political candidate, right? Was that kind of the ruling in FCC versus Citizens United?
Yeah, Citizens United.
Yeah, they actually can't support a political candidate. They can support a political action committee, and that committee may support a candidate. Right. In fact, that committee its sole purpose may be to support a candidate. But technically, it's a political action committee.
It's a very fine distinction.
Yeah.
No, I see what you mean. I see what Jacob is saying there, is texting there, and it is that, you know, I just think that it's, people have gotten so wise that they've learned how to, the only term I can think of is hack capitalism. And so the question may be related to what your concerns are, David, is a system that is now easily hacked itself broken then, if it's so open to hacking the way it has been, the way, you know.
But now we're like mixing economics with politics, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we're not yeah, we've kind of gone away from just the pure inequality to the influence on politicians. So I mean,
Right.
they're two separate things. They might be linked somewhat, but they're
Yeah.
different aspects of the situation.
But I think you can never really separate economics from politics. And I think that's how the people have been able to get away with by saying, oh, let's just talk economics. Let's not include the politics about underlying, but it's really the politics underlying that determines, bottom line, what goes on with the economy or what the economic policies are.
We don't want to see the sausage being made.
or we don't want to see who's making the sausage. Right.
Yeah, what's really interesting about the US is every adult, or most adults, maybe not criminals or stuff like that, but most adults get one vote. So voting wise, we're equal, but in terms of how we can influence elections, advertising, stuff like that, the rich have an unfair influence on. Or I don't know about unfair. I'm saying I probably think unfair, but
I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
That the wealthy sometimes have an unfair influence.
Yeah.
But I know that if I had some money enough to afford an ad, I would want to be able to do that.
Right.
And I wouldn't want, so we need to have a rule that makes bad people behave properly, that still allows good people to do what they want to do. And that's hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you think about, everyone has one vote, but wealthier people have more of an influence on media, which influences voting. So it kind of reminds me, it's kind of similar with law. Like everyone is entitled to a lawyer, but richer people can get better lawyers, right? So it's like, it's a semi-equalization. Yeah.
Well, I mean that will always be the case, and that has always been the case. But it used to be that the role of government was to try to dampen that try make things a little to make the playing field what's the term more even. But I think government isn't doing that as well as it has to anymore. And from there, all the problems I think come out, are rooted in that. So that's a problem. How do you fix that?
Good question.
Well, like I kind of see politics as like a second order impact. So it's like the ultimate impact to people at the end of the day. It's the income inequality, maybe global warming, as we mentioned. I think that's kind of up for debate, but you could argue that, companies, driven by profit, aren't as concerned about the climate. And so, they then pollute more and contribute more to that. That's an argument. And then you could also argue maybe better regulation should be put in place. But
Well,
I guess
the argument. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, but anyways, I was gonna say like we like economic like inequality I guess like the ultimate impact to people is the inequality, right? That's like the main one, I would say, when we talk about economics. Most people think about income inequality, right?
Well, I understand what you're saying, and in terms of companies that damage the environment, to me, that is another situation. Maybe you're familiar with the tragedy of the commons,
Yeah.
where you have a pasture where cattle can graze, and if everybody brought their cattle to graze because they have a right to do so, then nobody gets to graze their cattle because the cattle will eat all the grass.
Yeah.
So these companies that produce things that put carbon in our air, they're affecting the pasture. And regulations need to be in place to address that. That's not necessarily a problem with capitalism. It's a problem with regulation.
But the regulations are made by the politicians, and the companies have the influence. So
round and round and round we go. Yeah.
An interconnected web. So it's like,
well, the thing is the solution, whatever it is, I don't have it, but the solution has to take all of those things into account.
We need a philosopher king.
Yeah.
No, don't.
So it's kind of like, how much do we assume that we as people will change, and how much do we assume that we as people will not change? So we need to change the system itself.
Yeah.
Because I guess as far as politics go, I guess a kind of cynical take would be, politicians, they're always going to just care about money, and so the big corporations are always going to like I guess a cynical take would be that's inevitable, right? And then a more optimistic take would be we can overcome the greedy corporations and make good regulations and decisions,
Yeah, but it takes enough people getting fed up and willing to do something about it, or not even do something, but vote the right people to office to fix it. And I don't think there are enough people out there who might even be convinced to think that way, that we need to get, certain policies enacted, and in order to do that, we have to elect certain candidates to office. And it's just part of, again, if I take a conspiratorial point of view, and I know it's exaggerated, it's the way basically the last, I'd say 40 or 50 years, the conventional wisdom has really been shaped by all these think tanks, all these academic departments who have really taken one tack and basically shut down all the other competing ideas. If you look at all the think tanks now, they're mostly all, and think tanks are basically funded by billionaires. And most of them are of one political stripe. There are one or few which are progressive or liberal, but the Hoover Institution, Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, the American Enterprise Institute, they're all of one, promoting one point of view, as if that is the only one available. Yeah.
But the thing is, we talk so much about greed and corruption and stuff at a higher level. As far as the ultimate impact, because you can spend all day saying, oh, this person, bribed this person is trying to trick us. At the end of the day, the final impact we're looking at is income inequality and maybe hurt to the environment, right? Like we have to agree, like at the end of the day, corruption has to hurt someone, right? Like we can say this person lied, this person misled, this person is just trying to trick their way into office. At the end of the day, what's the impact? It's income inequality and the environment, right? Like we have to agree on what the final impact is, right?
Yeah.
Is that what the final impact is?
I would say those are two of the that I can think of, two of the big problems. But there's a third problem. I would say a third problem that is as big as those two as well. I think is the fact it's sort of what we've been talking about, but I would say I would go a little bit farther away. I think this corruption is it's so pervasive, but it's not really corruption. What the problem is, I mean, that's another problem, but the problem with capitalism itself as it is right now, it's really the fact that corporations have become so strong. And this wasn't really the case before, but now they are so strong and so numerous
But
that
that's,
it's not,
I
we're not
guess,
really, I'm sorry.
what I'm saying is that's like a second order. So
Well,
the ultimate impact is what happens to people. So
well,
corporations
what happens
are
to
like,
people? So maybe I'm taking a little bit too long to make my point. What happens to people there is that if we are for example, in the United States, but not just the United States, any liberal democratic framework, the risk that you take is that those corporations, because they become so political and so powerful, they take away the power of people to actually decide anything. And that is something that is not, second order, like you say, that's first order. That's, you're taking away democracy from the people. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but it's kind of like a continuum, like a voyage. And I think we're far along that route.
Yeah,
Far along
we're
that route
further along, definitely,
than before, certainly.
than when Teddy Roosevelt was able to break
Oh,
up all
yes,
these
absolutely. We're much
these
further
trusts.
along. We're much further along than with Clinton, than in the
Yeah.
90s. I mean,
Yeah.
in the last 20 years the corporations have become much bigger, much more powerful, much more numerous, and much more influential in just in the last 20 years.
it sounds like you're saying not just necessarily strictly how much money people have or income inequality, but the ability to decide kind of how we structure our lives. I guess it's kind of like how we structure our lives and our way of being. It's deeper than just monetary, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think well, at least from my point of view, I think you identified the big two. Yeah, the income inequality and the environmental degradation. That's certainly going to affect people directly. But I also think the loss of power in government, I think that's something that affects people directly as well. The loss of essentially power, like if people are voting, this is the mechanism. People are voting politicians to represent them and make decisions in their behalf. But you then on the other side, in like this shadowy sphere, which then becomes a little bit more clear with the lobbyists, that you can actually at least see, and we can measure it as well. Like if you look at the money that lobbyists spend now in comparison to the money that they used to spend before, I mean, there's been an exponential increase. And then you have, again, you don't really see, then it's like what happens inside the halls of Congress, Senate, House of Representatives, those interactions, those phone calls. But if you're electing the representatives, but the corporations are paying for them to be reelected and win campaigns and win their seats, I mean, they're going to listen to you to a certain extent, but they're also going to listen to the corporations. And if the corporations give them enough money, they're probably going to listen to the corporations more than they're going to listen to you. So that's really the dilemma there, and that's something that is the more it happens, the less the less power you have, the more power the corporations have.
But even so, like whenever we talk about power, like that's still second order. Like for example, if I want to go for a walk right now, I can go for a walk right now, right? If I want to drink a cup of tea, I can drink a cup of tea. When the power ultimately hits us, like when the loss of power ultimately hits us, it's when we have to live a certain way that we actually don't want to live. So it's like maybe there's some law that we have to abide by, and it's unnecessary. Or maybe I don't like at some point it has to hit. Like power is kind of like a second order impact, but the first order impact is kind of like how it hits our daily lives.
Well, consider one specific example. I'm going to give you one specific example.
Yeah.
School shootings, theater shootings, discos, nightclub shootings, all kinds of shootings, because there are all kinds of shootings, right? the vast majority of people agree that there should be some sort of control. Like the exact amount of control, that is certainly up for debate in the United States. But the vast majority of people agree that there should be some sort of control. It doesn't matter because the National Rifle Association really pays politicians a lot of money and has such a degree of influence, and the whole industry of weapons has such a degree of influence that it doesn't really matter if you and me and Raul and David and Jacob and the vast majority of people that live here think, well, you should have at least some sort of minimal protection so you can't have all these crazy people with guns shooting at people.
Yeah, so
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the corporations are going to make that decision for you through the politicians. And it doesn't matter what you say. So you might get shot at some point, right? That's one way in which it affects you directly. That's an example, though. That's one example. I mean, there are other examples. You know, you can talk about other industries that have similar impacts.
Yeah, because it is so hard to trace the chain of causation, or for example, that comes from how, you know, the interaction between lobbyists and corporations and legislature or even the executive department, and how the final effect reaches us. Like, for example, college affordability, right? Nobody, very few people connect the fact that college is so expensive to economic policies that basically say, no, we're not going to raise enough funds to fund colleges so that people can afford a college education. And it just compared to how much college costs for people who are now, you know, sponsoring legislation that not directly but indirectly makes funding for college education inadequate, and that is a very hard connection to make, you know. And so people are saying, well, you know, well, you need you pull yourself by your bootstraps, then work hard and do that. But 40 years ago, it wasn't that difficult to be able to work your way through college, you know, because it's just the cost of college. Yeah. You know, well, it's almost impossible these days.
Yeah, it's increased so much, but also the cost of healthcare as well. It's prohibitive.
Yeah.
For so many people. I mean, the level of debt that people have, and this is not something that, again, like when I was talking about the height of American power, the American civilization, the economic system, you know, mid-century, that is, things were different, you know, the circumstances were different. And like what Raul was just saying, you know, like the cost for education wasn't always what it is today, right? I mean, it has increased again exponentially. Same thing with healthcare and all that. So it's not like we're talking about something a flat phenomenon that things haven't changed. Things have changed and they have benefited the corporate world, but not so much the people. And that affects people in a number of ways, like social mobility, which used to be a feature of American society. That is, I mean, that has been compromised.
Yeah, measures of social.
Do any of you guys remember pinball machines?
Yeah.
Bumpers and flippers and all that.
Of course.
Yeah. Let me put a couple of bumpers on this conversation. Okay. Just something to keep in mind.
I like pinball, so yeah, go ahead.
This is an Oreo cookie. It's a carbohydrate-rich food. And generally, people agree that it's bad for you. And they promote a low-carb diet. But this is also a carbohydrate-rich food, but it's good for you. Not all corporations are bad. Some large corporations are terrible, and we have to do something about it. But I don't think we should be talking about all corporations as if they're all like this.
Yeah, granted,
Some of
David.
them are like this.
Yeah, but the good ones don't need our attention. That's the thing. Yeah, granted, I agree with you, but you know,
No, I definitely agree. Yeah, I don't think
we
like
just get lumped into you know, just corporations. We really mean the bad actors.
Well, it's like you brought up gun control. We have to do more to control guns. We have to do something to limit access to guns so that crazy people don't go around shooting us up. And sometimes, I think it was in one of these conversations last week or the week before, where the point was made that yes, we need more gun control, but you know what? That doesn't make the people not crazy who are doing this. So, in other words, it's addressing the effect, not the cause. Does that make sense?
Well, if we
to
make it so easy
I
for
had
just
got my
anyone.
hand up for quite a long. I had my hand up for quite a long time. Is that not the policy to? I mean, I don't understand what's going on here. It's like,
No, just feel free to jump in, Jacob. Yeah.
okay,
You don't
so,
notice it sometimes. Yeah.
okay. I mean, a lot has been discussed. So what is the main, I mean, see, for me, all of this stuff is so clear. You know, capitalism is essentially about, you know, the individual who is self-interested and profits first. It's profits first, then people and nature and animals. That's a fact. It's not a belief. All isms, doesn't matter, capitalism, communism, whatever, any ism damages the brain, damages perception, because you're always looking at life, which has problems, through the lens of that filter. And therefore it limits your perception, it distorts perception. So can we see, I feel the central problem is the individual. The problem is not the system. We are the system. We are the system. The system is us, and we made the system out of our own disorder. Therefore, the system is disorderly. So I feel that the solution is to be found in creating a new human being, or to put it another way, to create a human being. Right now, humans are inhuman. The way they're living, they're inhuman, incapable of love, peace, joy. They can only, thought can only imagine what those things are, which are limitations of the real thing. So I feel that the revolution must begin with the person, in the psyche. There must be a freedom of the mind first. Then with that free mind, and by the way, it cannot take time because we don't have time. So it must happen now in this group. Each one of us must free their mind now. Then with that free mind, we can look. We can look at capitalism. We can look at the world today as we are, as thought has put it together, right? And then we can act from that place of clarity, that place of lucidity, which has no bias, no prejudice. There is no fear. There is no grief, mental afflictions. Otherwise, if we don't do that, then we're just engaging in self-deception, constant self-deception, looking through the lens of our past conditioning, our programming, which is very limited and distorting. So,
Jacob, just so I understand.
But getting back to the politics, you know, when I first started, in the politics, I would say, I think 9/11 was what woke me up. I was always, you know, I was always a responsible voter, and but I wasn't actively involved as every citizen should be meaning being well informed on all the major issues of today, and then actually going out and campaigning, supporting the campaigns of the candidates you feel are the most wise and the most loving amongst in your community, amongst yourselves. And but that woke me up. And at first, as I began to, because I spent for 11 years, I spent 80 hours a week. Now it's much less, because now I know what the deal is, what's going on. But I spent 80 hours a week consistently for 11 years using my computer. I only got it back in 2010. So I've only had it for 11. So at first, when I started to realize, oh my God, look at these corrupt people. One top of the fraction, the top fraction. We're not even talking about 1%. We're talking about the top fraction of 1% that is dominating the whole system, okay? And they're not, and because they are not wise, they are acting in their own interest, and to hell with everyone else. If anyone else benefits, it's a side, it's like an accident. It's not their intent. And they're destroying the planet. We now have weapons of mass destruction. So we have this high technology now with cyber, security and all this. We have all this technology in the hands of psychopaths, essentially, to a high degree of psychopathy. They lack wisdom. And this is a very dangerous situation for the entire, not just for the species, but for the planet. We can destroy the planet many times over. So I got upset with them, right? But then I learned, wait a minute, they don't have ultimate power. Ultimate power, as much money as they have, ultimate power resides with the people. We vastly outnumber them, okay? So how is it that we have the power, and yet so few, we're not organized to exert that power? And so I then switched it. Now I don't pay attention to the people at the top, because I realize it's us. The problem is us, your neighbor, your family. These are the people that have blood on their hands. They pulled the trigger, but we enabled them to pull the trigger, to create all the havoc in all the world for decades, okay? We're responsible, our parents were responsible for their negligence, et cetera, going back. So then it goes back then to the individual, how to free the mind so that people feel empowered, because fear is how they control us. They are controlling us through the mechanism of fear. So how to liberate the human being without taking time, meaning that it should happen fast in the speed of light to an individual, and that's the only way it can happen. How is this to take place so that they are now empowered to then participate without fear in the whole political process of change, so that we can then transition? That will take time, so that we can transition to a whole new way of living, which is rooted in love, compassion, goodness, all the things we imagine, but all of those things are limited because they are just what thought imagines them to be. But a person who has activated wisdom is actually living it, is actually the very embodiment of it. So philosophy, I feel, plays the role of being the vehicle to liberate, to bring wisdom, to activate that part of the human being that is not activated at all, at all. There's not one, it's only thought. Thought is the controller, thought is controlling, and thought has a place, but thought is doing the driving, and it's limited. There's another capacity, which is wisdom, which is pure perception that sees the whole, okay, and acts from the whole, that is not yet activated. So I feel that this is the job of philosophy, of the philosophers. And then with an activated wisdom and a large number of us, we can then meet the problems of the world and the solutions will be revealed not in the system, but in the problems themselves. The problems will teach us, all of us, what needs to be done. So yeah, I feel that. And the other thing is about, because you guys are discussing solutions, we already have the solutions. And as we have more wise people, we'll even come up with greater solutions. But as we are now, we have so many solutions. So then the question may be, well, why aren't they being implemented? Because they do not serve the interests of the people at the very top. So they are preventing that because they are dominating the system. They have their hands on the levers of power right now, okay? Because why? Not because they have the power, is we have given our power to them. We, the people, have given, because through our negligence, through laziness, through feeling disempowered, feeling that I can't do anything, I'm just one person. I mean, yet one person can change the whole world, not realizing that. So, and this is the current state of affairs. So we have the solutions. We don't have the people in positions of power to actually implement them. This is the central issue. And again, it goes back to the citizen. The word idiot was originally someone who was not involved politically. If you go and study the etymology of the word idiot, is someone who is not involved politically, who's not involved. So we have a nation of idiots in that sense of the word, with lots of degrees, academically smart, but yet stupid in politics. We're not. So I feel this is the sense. So how to awaken your neighbor? You have to start with your family. You have to start with your neighbors. You have to start with your work associates, your business associates. And you have to, well, first of course, you have to awaken yourself first. Then you have to awaken others. And they will awaken others, and so on and so forth. And that, I feel, organically, it will spread. And, so that's, there's probably much more to say, but that's all I have to say right now.
Jacob, I want to step in here. So you might find this interesting. We had a previous discussion on utopia. It was kind of interesting. Is utopia possible? What would it look like? I'm not sure if so people in power, who are corrupt, that's an issue. But I think there's more fundamental underlying issues. Even if people in power weren't corrupt, even if there was no thing like that, I think people might still not get along just because they have disagreements about things. Like some people prefer chocolate ice cream, some people prefer vanilla ice cream. Some people think that
we've been programmed to be divided. We are not working together. We are not cooperative, right? Everything has been emphasized, and this is by design, I feel. I feel that the powers that be know this. They have emphasized the individualistic activity, self-interest, love yourself. All of this is indoctrinated into us, right?
Yeah,
because why? It feeds the illusion of division and separation, which then leads to conflict. So we wind up fighting each other. Even philosophies, in the sense of ideas, all beliefs, religious beliefs, etc., any kind of belief, it divides human beings up. So can we free the mind of all
Jacob,
beliefs?
No, I don't think anyone would object to what you're saying. It's that, you have to become better people. But so in concrete terms, how does that happen? How do we make that happen?
We have to do both because we don't have enough time.
Yeah, but what do you mean?
Both means we have to work on the level of the individual. At the same time, we have to be involved politically. Even though we haven't activated the wisdom yet, still thought has to find a way to engage still, because they're going to kill us. We're going to be destroyed. So the thought has to at least be aware of the danger, of the urgency. What's going on? What's been going on? and what's still going on and what will continue to go on, because the future is now. So if we want to know what the future will be like, just all you have to do is pay attention to what's going on now in the world today. Give all your energy and attention to it, and you'll know where we're headed. So
I think there's one more thing I want to say. So politicians, the media, they divide us. But even if it weren't for them, I remember you said that
I agree with
programming.
You. They're already divided from birth. I agree with you. That's why I was saying the politicians are just taking advantage of things, but they're not the main problem. That's what I was trying to explain to you, that the main problem is us. We're the main problem, the citizens, the 99.7% of the population who are not well-informed, right? Who are not politically engaged. I mean, how many hours, if I were to ask each one of you, how many hours a week do you devote to the political process? How many hours? Is it 20 hours? Is it 10 hours?
So are you
saying? Is it 5 hours? Is it even 1 hour?
Jacob, my question is, I can understand the conceptual part of what you're saying. So are you saying we should be more active, like organize more, attend more caucuses, or hold sit-ins, or hold teach-ins, or how do we reach what you say? How do we fix or attain what you say we need to attain, which is a more enlightened population? Because we
have to do, like I said, we have to do both, right? We have to work on activating. Each of us must work on ourselves, because no one can do this.
What does work on ourselves mean?
That means you have to see yourself. Meaning,
what does that mean?
As the thinker,
okay.
What does that mean concretely?
Be aware. Be aware of what thought is telling you right now. Meaning, who spoke to me just now? Be aware of that. But anyway, I don't want to do this right now. This is not the time. But I wanted to answer your question politically. What do we do? Yeah. I created a group as an example. I'm not saying it's the only way, but this is my proposal. We're going to take over New York City, okay? And the way to do that is by creating what I call a majority voting bloc. I calculated already. I did all the calculations. We need 1 million people. Now, this is just an example, okay, for New York City. And we're going to take over the mayorship, 2/3 of all the congressional seats, the city council, all of that, right? So that we can then change the laws, so that we can then make way for the implementation of all the solutions we already have. And then New York City, and it doesn't have to be New York City, it can be any major city. But I'm saying in New York City, we're trying to do it. And then it will be a model, because I want people to see, I want human beings to see what's possible. You see, when they see what's possible in action and in reality, they'll say, oh my God, why didn't we do that already? And if they're doing that in New York, why don't we do it in Chicago and all the other major cities? You see, and all around the world, people will emulate. So the problem right now is one of vision. People don't have a vision, and they don't believe anything is possible, or very little is possible, you know? So once we establish, and it doesn't have to be New York City, it could be any major city. Once we establish a model, look what is possible, my friends. And the only way that's going to happen, we have to take hold of the government. And we have to take hold of 2/3 so that we are in control of the government. And then we change the laws. We repeal any law that is getting in our way. And then we implement the solutions, and we show everyone what's possible. So that's the basically the idea that I propose in New York City, but it can happen anywhere.
What's the solution though? Because that's the kind of like what we're trying to get to here. What's the alternative to what we have, right? That you think is a better model, better system.
The solutions are, if you want to know the solutions, you look at the problem. You become intimately familiar with the problem, and the solution will reveal itself in the problem. It will not come from a mind that's capitalistic, communistic, whatever. It's going to come from perceiving, being in communion with the problem. And then that will reveal itself. It will speak to us what needs to be done. Because we will be thinking together. You get it? Not, see, the way it is set up now, people are individualistic. They're always asking, what's in it for me? What's my self-interest, as opposed to someone else's self-interest? We are not working together. That's why there has to be, we have to work on two prongs. One, freeing the mind, and two, politically implementing the solution so that people see what's possible. So we have to work on these two levels. And again, this is my proposition. If somebody has a better proposition, I'm all ears.
Well, I think that I think that's it's commendable that you're trying to enact change in some. I think here we're in this conversation, we're just trying to figure out what are the problems with the current system, and what alternatives could in fact provide a betterment of society. Which, I mean.
Oh, sorry, your screen just froze, your video and audio. But yeah, I think Bruno might be saying in some ways we're kind of doing what you mentioned. We're thinking about, I guess, we're just kind of reflecting on different ways, we can structure society, what might be good. We're not really, part of the good thing about this group is we're not really committed to an ism. So we're kind of just playing around with them, saying like, what if we did it this way? What if we did it this way?
Yeah, we're just trying to get a little bit more enlightened than we previously were.
It's sort of like what you said, Raul, in the beginning, right? Like a lot of people go into this endeavor of, figuring out what the best economic solutions are, but they already have an agenda, right? If you do that, you're just justifying something that you already had, which is pointless.
That's why a free mind is
but that's a very, very abstract concept of what a free mind is. You could.
Well, we didn't discuss what a free mind is.
I know, but because it's. I don't know what a free mind is.
First of all, don't even start there, right? Start with what is. The what is your mind is not free. Begin there.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
No. You look at it. At it. Ask yourself.
I don't think my mind is not free. I think my mind is free. I can think of anything I want to. Okay. I don't feel there's somebody controlling my mind.
Okay, so I will accept what you say. Are you saying that through observation, you have observed that you're free of all past conditioning? Is that correct?
I am not free of all past conditions, but I believe that I am free. I am free to make decisions from here on. There are certain constraints.
I think what you're referring to is the program is free to reprogram itself and do whatever it wants.
Well, we're straying from the topic. I think we should do this some other day, because this is now.
In other words,
this is now metaphysics and beyond.
No, it's not metaphysics. We're talking facts. We're talking the actuality.
That is not a fact. Whether we're free-minded or not is something we can never prove, I think. So
really? I mean,
we cannot.
Yeah, and I mean, it is true that that's not really like the problem that we're discussing today, because that's kind of a rabbit hole.
By race, by religion, by beliefs, by culture, by so many things, nationality, by ideology.
But by the fact that we know that we are programmed is already an indication that we're not completely.
No, you
programmed.
said you weren't. Okay. Are you programmed or not? You said you weren't.
No, by the fact that you're saying that you think we are programmed.
No, I don't think anything. I'm asking you to ask yourself, am I programmed? Ask yourself, am I programmed?
Well, everyone is, nobody's really free in an absolute sense. I mean, that is a given, because you've been so programmed. This is like self-evident, so clear. Everyone will agree. I mean, everyone that I've ever talked to. The question becomes, is there freedom from the program? And then there's debate in that, but no one debates that you've been programmed heavily. There are many influences right now. When you're listening to my words, you're not listening.
Can we go back to our topic?
Translating the words according to what you recognize, you cognize,
Jacob,
which is part of your programming.
Jacob,
so you're not listening.
This is away from our topic. Can we go back to our topic? Maybe some other day we can discuss that.
Yeah, I think
it's fine to be
that's a
honest,
different
Joseph.
discussion.
Yeah.
So, what do you guys think about the Nordic model, for example? Because I think that's an interesting alternative to just straight, capitalism, no barriers. I think but in the Nordic countries, they have been able to implement a very good balance, I think, between.
So you're doing it again. You're doing it again. You're looking for some system, right? Instead of asking, first of all, you have to be in a position of power to implement the solutions. We already have the solutions. If you want to take the Nordic thing or whatever you want, whatever your favorite flavor of ice cream is, that's fine. But you have to address the central question. You have no power to implement them. So how do we get the power? That's the question.
Well, but I'm not.
We'll set that aside for a different day. Right now, we're just looking at alternatives. Yeah.
Yeah. Right now, we're just kind of playing around with different ideas.
That's a topic we agreed on, and maybe some other day we can talk about how we get the power to implement our desired solution. But that's not the topic for the day.
Yeah, I mean,
that's not what we came here for.
Yeah, we're all asleep, unaware, lazy, stupid, and blind, and we're not listening to you.
You're incapable of listening.
And incapable.
To anyone. No, to anyone. To your best friend, your lover, your dearest, closest children. You're incapable of that. And to be aware of that is already the beginning of wisdom. Just to be aware without judgment, without a desire to change anything, is already the beginning.
But how do you know if people are aware or not aware? I mean,
you have to find out.
How do you judge that? How do you know when you have reached ultimate wisdom? What is your benchmark when you say, okay, I am now the wisest I could possibly be?
You're not starting from ultimate wisdom. You're not looking at that at all. You're not concerned. Yeah. That's an abstraction. You're in the matrix. Okay, you don't know anything about love, peace, joy, wisdom, right? So begin with what is, meaning I'm self-centered, right? I'm self-interested, right? I have fear.
Can we go back to our topic, Jacob? Please don't take over the discussion.
Well, no, you guys were asking
and steer it to a different. Yeah, but
no, I don't want to steer it.
You are channeling us towards how do you implement your desired solution. We're not there.
No, I
that's not what we're talking
about. How to get power. But if you don't want to do that, that's okay.
No, not today. Not in this session. That's not what we.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not interested in taking power in general. I mean, to be honest with you, I think.
And how are you going to implement these solutions?
Well, I'm not.
We'll worry about that. We'll worry about that some other day.
Oh, you just. Oh, so
this is just a discussion.
So what is the purpose
to enlighten ourselves?
You're just
we haven't yet decided what
you haven't yet decided. Okay.
Okay. So
I haven't
seen the day.
I've done this many times. I enjoy it.
Yeah, but
well, I mean, this is not we're not talking about revolutionary politics. We're not going to take the power of anything right now. It's not. It's a philosophical discussion. So, I mean, we're trying to figure out, and this is something that people have been trying to figure out for quite some time, both in practice and in theory, what is the best economic model? I mean, what you've told us about, I mean, you're talking about a metaphysical concept, which is not really a matter of economics.
I'm a practical, down to earth person.
It doesn't sound that way.
Let's look at what's possible, right? And let's create it so that people will see with their own eyes. Oh my God, this thing is actually working.
Well, what is the economic model that you would propose in your society? Because you haven't told us an economic model. So
the point is the economic model is the invention of the program. Whatever the program comes up with is very limited. Okay, and it's distorted. In other words, whatever system you come up with is shaped by your own.
Okay, let's grant that. So within the program, let's try to come up with what we think is what we can come up with within the limits of the programming. What
I would say
would be an ideal, or at least the best possible economic system.
Yeah, I don't know if, can you tell us, what the perfect economic system is? I certainly cannot. I certainly
What
cannot
makes
tell you
up
what
the system? Think of it like this. What makes up the system? It's people. There's no system that separate from the people. So if the
Right.
people are corrupted, the system will be corrupted. No matter what system you choose, this system, that system, the other system, it is made up of people. And if the people are self-interested, are divided within themselves, are conflicted, fighting each other, it will fall apart. It will fail.
But if the people
It doesn't
fix
matter
themselves,
Yeah, except that people are not perfect. And
if the
so we
people
have to,
if the people fix themselves, where would that lead? How would economics lead once the people were to fix themselves?
There would be clarity. When you, okay,
What
there would be
kind-
clarity.
what
clarity,
what
what
kind
would
of
be the
clarity?
institutions? So will there be private property? Will there be,
Will there be
yeah,
We will, if there were clarity amongst us, we would all see what needs to be done and we would do it. We
But
don't come first, wait, we don't come first to the problem with the solutions. Oh, this system, let's make that foundation, let's make that institution. No, we come, I know nothing. That's how we come to the problem. I know nothing. I want nothing, I know nothing. And in that intimacy with what is, the isness, okay, that will reveal to us what needs to be done.
Mhm.
If we already knew the solution, why would we be coming to this group?
No,
I mean,
the group, the philosophy of the group should be the activation of wisdom within you.
no, the philosophy of the group is not something you dictate.
I mean, philosophy.
You know,
I'm not saying your group. I'm saying that should be, I
No,
would think,
even
I would think
for-
the love
for-
of wisdom, which is what philosophy means, right? That should be what should philosophy, I mean, what else then is
But
philosophy?
how can you have wisdom if you're not able to answer questions? Like we are the problem of economics is it's posing a question. How do we regulate production? How do we regulate distribution? And then you can say like people are flawed. Well, first of all, I mean, people are always going to be flawed. I agree with you. I mean, we need to try to better ourselves, but I cannot expect realistically, it's just not going to happen. If I cannot expect myself to be a perfect person, which I cannot, how can I expect that from 7 billion people? I mean,
There's going to be a transition.
It's not a
period,
possibility.
Right? The old people have to die off, right? We then have to rear up the children, right?
Well, the children are not going to be perfect either.
No, we're not talking about perfect. No one mentioned the word perfect except
they're still going to be human.
I'm not talking about perfection. I'm talking about sensitivity, clarity.
What does that?
Communication.
Okay, if you have clarity, how do you regulate production and distribution? How do you establish how you're going to produce things, how you're going to distribute things, how you're going to accumulate things?
I already answered.
Okay.
No, you only answered how to get
I think what
there.
you're asking though is in the transitionary period, right?
Not
how will we function?
No, I mean, you said the only thing that you've said in terms of what I just asked is basically that we need to find clarity and understand the problem. But I mean, I honestly, I mean, I haven't heard an answer. I haven't heard a proposal.
That's why we want to create a model so that you actually see it and you see it in action.
Well, what's the model? That's what I'm asking you. What's the model?
The model is we begin with the implementation of the solutions we already have.
What's the solution? What's the solution?
The solutions to all our problems.
What's the solution to our problems?
In concrete terms.
We've already been discussing some.
No, you haven't.
Oh, yes, you have.
We have, but you haven't.
We have. We've been looking into it, and you don't want to talk about it. You want to.
Because this is not the central problem. The central problem is not that. The central problem is that
even if
there is no clarity among
Jacob, even if we agree with you, that's not what we are interested in talking about
I understand that.
right now, and
I get
and
it.
so we want to stay with the topic.
Okay,
All right,
go
Jacob,
ahead.
we gotta move
Go ahead.
on. We gotta move on.
Yeah,
This
because
is
every
just
time you interject and say you're not addressing the problem, and then you steer us to that topic.
By the way, I
But
just want to say to
yeah,
Michael, I'm not talking about utopia. You mentioned that word, and that's not what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. So just to answer that. yeah.
Okay, here's something related to economic system that I've been thinking about lately. I had this sort of thought that there is, I called it the one bad idea in economics, which is to have morality be dictated by the market. I don't know if people understand what I'm talking about.
can you be a
but-
little bit more specific? I
to
think
to
I
say
do.
that if we let the market operate as efficiently as whatever, to have it operate properly, and that whatever is the outcome, for example, the distribution of income that comes out of it, if it so happens that the operation of a market, even without corruption, even without any sort of anomaly, if it so happens that it means that 30% of the people will live in poverty, so be it. That is the moral outcome, and there's nothing immoral about that, and I think this is a big departure from, for example, what Adam Smith first was talking about. I don't think Adam Smith ever said that the market is moral, that the outcome of the invisible hand is moral, is something, has a moral basis. Just saying that hey, if we do this, if people pursue their selfish interests, somehow we get this, we can get, not we are guaranteed to get, we can get this good outcome. And somehow that has been through the years been changed into, well, if you let the market operate, and then whatever comes out of it is good.
Well, I think some people assume that when they shouldn't. Some people assume the opposite when they shouldn't.
Right.
Some people just don't really care. So yeah, I guess it depends on what group of people you're in. Some people,
I know. Yeah, I mean the Ayn Rand kind of group, that's basically them, and they tend.
And there is a group there, yeah.
And their point of view tends to have become ascendant in,
I think there are elements. I mean, there are elements of morality in a market, but I don't think everything about it is moral, like inherently moral. Like
or immoral. The market's amoral. Yeah. That's what I think.
Yeah, the market is amoral. It doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree. Really, I think that's a good way to put it. That the market is amoral, because that's not the objective of the market, right? The market is essentially what? A marketplace. You go, you buy, you sell. And whatever happens, it really depends on the balance of power between buyers and sellers. It's not where that's the mistake, Raul. I think it's to give it some sort of like metaphysical property. The market is always right. The market is going to attribute morality. I mean, the market is not God. I mean, the market is just an interaction between people that are trying to figure out how they can attribute value to something so they can trade something.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, I think the question is, when do people claim it to be moral, or what are the moral aspects of it? And I think sometimes people think like, people who work hard deserve more, and people who don't work as hard deserve less. So I think there's elements of truth, but then I think there's compounding factors, like, people didn't grow up in as good of a situation. People were disadvantaged from the start, so it's harder for them to get an edge. So I think it's really just a balance of the two. But I think there is something to that idea that that if you work harder, you should get rewarded more.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just a matter of balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, I think you're just so damn reasonable, Michael. Yeah, everything you say it's too reasonable. So I can't really say anything about.
Well, I think we all know that a CEO is not 900 times more valuable than a supervisor.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess there's should people get paid their worth? There's a question: is a CEO 900 times more valuable? And people debate about that. I don't think so. You don't think so. Some people do think so. I think that's a discussion to be had. I don't think so. But then
go ahead.
But then there's the question: even if that were true, does that mean that we should adjust our payment system to reflect the actual value?
Well, and also we have to be careful about that. There's a movement now to raise the minimum wage, and I think people deserve to make a living adequate to meet all of their needs and everything. But there is a danger there of if you raise it too much. Well, let me put it this way. McDonald's is already looking at machines, automation that will cook burgers.
I've seen that.
Yeah. So if you raise the minimum wage, that makes the automation more, that improves the return on investment for automation.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to happen anyway, but doesn't that hasten the pace? I don't know.
And then there's talk about making legislation to ban certain types of automation.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work.
No, that's not going to fly. I don't think that's the right way.
Let
me go back to the CEO pay thing. There's one thing that most people kind of miss out on. And this is only because, as an economist, I think this way. One way to think about it, just to have a gauge of how excessive executive pay is. If you ask the CEO, let's say, for the job you're doing now, what happens if instead of being paid $100 million, you only get $50 million? Are you going to quit? I don't think any of them will say, yeah, I am. Most of them will still stay on the job. Because there are kind of strong indicators that the market for corporate executives, is not a competitive market.
It's another invisible hand.
Yeah, because their pay is basically set by something called a compensation committee in the corporate boards. And most corporate boards are handpicked by the CEO. And they have cross memberships. You're a member of my board, I'm a member of your board. If you don't vote for my raise or my pay, my executive pay, I might not vote for yours. And so there are indications that executive pay is not a competitive market. And beats me how you make that competitive. You'll have to have legislation that's I don't think will even work. It basically goes down to human decency. And
so, in other words, it's not laws alone.
No, definitely, of course,
accomplishes what you're after. It's changing a person's mind.
Yeah, which will will make the laws effective.
Yeah,
and it's the solution is not just in one thing, but in all things. And now, what do we think about capitalism if the age of robotics goes kind of full flower?
automated. Yeah.
What if humans become obsolete like horses did?
I don't think so.
Well,
Could be, but I don't.
I mean, humans in the numbers now, horses, did not disappear, right? But there are a lot less horses now than there used to be because we don't need them for
Way.
transportation,
Oh yeah.
right? So basically that's an indication that horses.
I always get this is unrelated, but I always get a kick when I watch a Western and you see people walking up and down the streets and there's no horse shit anywhere. There was horse shit everywhere.
Yeah. They just make it a little bit nicer to look
Yeah.
at than real life.
But I mean that is something that we need to start thinking about.
I think you make a very good point, and that actually connects directly to the initial question, right? Right, which is I guess a provoking question, provocative question, a thought-provoking question. Is capitalism obsolete? But it might be actually not right now, but you make the point of robotics. I mean, that make it actually. It might actually become obsolete in 50 years from now, 100 years from now. I don't think it is now in this sense, not at all.
No.
But in 50 years from now, or 100 years from now, or 200, let's say 200, it's pretty certain that it's going to be obsolete because we're not going to disappear because we're the bosses, right? Humans are not like horses. There's nothing. There isn't a species above us, but in terms of working people, the human worker might be exactly like the horse was before. Right. The human, a CEO is going to look at a human worker and at a robot, and he's going to say, well, what would possess me to choose the human worker instead of this robot that has 100 times more productivity, right? It will make no sense. It will make no sense.
I think there's robots replacing our manual labor, and even maybe our intellectual labor to some extent. And then there's robots replacing our ability to write books or write music or do more creative stuff. I think once robots are able to replace our ability to be creative, I think that'll really, really transform stuff, because then we're really kind of useless, I guess. But yeah.
Well, and even if you're right, Michael, which I think you are, but even if you're right, the vast majority of people do work that arguably that actually can be replaced. You don't need to be super imaginative to imagine if technology is advanced enough, some robot will be able to replace you, unless you do like some very specific things. So my point is, the vast majority of the market, right, is going to be absorbed by this. And at that point, Andrew Yang is, it's 2020 and he's already talking about it. I think he's before his time, but, or sorry, ahead of his time. But at some point, everybody's going to be talking about this, right? What do we do with all these people that have no jobs? Because there's no point in giving them jobs.
In my opinion, you have raised two very interesting questions that should be considered in another meeting: artificial intelligence and universal basic income. I think those are fascinating questions. And, that part of the journey between here and enlightenment is discussing these questions.
Yeah. I think in terms of cognitive, I'm going to go into it just a little bit because I'm going to go back to economic system.
This Oreo sitting here and I'm going to eat it.
You're making me jealous.
The thing that makes me kind of stay up and think about it at night with a little bit of apprehension is, if we reach a point, and maybe we won't be here anymore, where civilization reaches a point where the productive capacity is basically the machines that you have, and not really the number of workers that you have. And so most of income will go to the people who own the machines. You know, the share of wages in the economy might go down.
I guess the problem comes
Yeah.
in
And
and how do people buy the stuff that the machines can make if they're
Right.
not making any money?
exactly, that's the thing I'm saying. So we
Or maybe
have,
they don't buy them. I don't know.
right, we have these people who will be very, very wealthy because they own the machines, and people who are basically selling their labor, which is no longer that necessary for most production. Is it going to be that most of the people who do not own machines will make their living by basically entertaining the people who own the machines? Is it going to be like feudalism again? Right? You have very, 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 very rich people, and the rest of society basically caters to the needs of the nobility. And I don't know if that will happen or not. You know, you can't tell me. The standard economic answer is saying, innovation will come up with something. We don't know what it is yet, but it has always been able to come up with new jobs, new industries that will employ those people who you feared will be unemployed. But that was a time when people had their cognitive abilities, which no machine could match. But people in the robotics field are saying that's our holy grail, singularity. Well, if we reach that, then what's going to happen to, you know, what's their economic system going to be like?
Well, I think we're going to have to look at two scenarios, really. I mean, I think it's extremely unlikely that they're right. You know, I think it's so unlikely because most people are we're not going to have enough jobs for everybody. I mean, it's the level, like I said before, the number of things that actually we can do that machines cannot do. Like that's going to be a minority of tasks. So yeah. I think that's a unlikely hypothesis, but let's say, okay, that's a possibility. One possibility, we are going to find replacement jobs for all the jobs that we lose. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that we won't. So right. we have to discuss what happens in that case, which at least in my opinion, but I think if you look at it rationally, I think that's the most likely scenario. So you have to discuss both scenarios, I guess that's what I'm saying. Right. And in one scenario, you got to figure out, in that scenario, capitalism does become obsolete. And then at least our capitalism, which is based on people working.
I kind of like rules against automation or laws against automation. And I know that's
one way to go about it. We just figure out that, let's just go back, take away the robots. We can actually keep what we have.
Paul Bunyan.
I forgot what that story is. Paul Bunyan, he's like a giant or something, right?
You're in Minnesota, you don't know Paul Bunyan.
You know what the problem with that hypothesis is, Michael? Though, I mean, you could actually do it, and actually it would be, I think, a good solution in a way. The problem is, what if the Japanese decide that they're not going to do that? Then you're screwed. Yeah. Because Japan basically takes over and the United States dies, I mean, and this applies to any country that does not do it or any country that does do it. You're going to get to a point that internationally, I mean, you cannot be competitive without doing those things, because you're going to have your worker, say I employ Carolyn here, who hasn't spoken yet. Hi, Carolyn. Imagine I mean, no offense, Carolyn, but you're a human. So, imagine I employ Carolyn, and then Carolyn goes against the robot. The robot works, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And Carolyn, I have to give her weekends off at least, or at least maybe what will pass for a weekend will be like Sundays off for Carolyn. I mean, even if she's not working one day, and it's still going to be a huge difference in productivity. and it's not going to be feasible.
I read a book a while ago that had kind of more of an optimistic take on what'll happen if and when automation takes over. It said historically our standard of living kind of keeps getting higher and higher. So more and more things will kind of become considered necessities. And like we'll have more money to spend on recreational things. Like in the book I read, for example, yoga class. So then in that example, there'd be more demand for yoga instructors.
Yeah. That could, very well be true. Yeah. That's
So
the
it
whole
kind of be
thing.
based on
It could be true. It could be
Yeah.
true, but we would have to implement some policies that would correct just the free market, let's say.
Or just the if the rise, the proliferation of robotic manufacturing, robotic production brings with it a drastic income inequality, a drastically concentrated distribution of income, then will the people who are not making enough income be able to afford, as you said, those things that will become available. So I mean, if we have this successful robotization and we are all owners of the robots, then the income will be distributed more evenly to the population. And so it would be almost a utopian society, right? Where you work a little bit, but you spend the rest of your days pursuing things that for you are pleasurable, educational, enlightening, or something like that. Yeah.
maybe like. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm just. I want to understand what you're saying. Are you saying that no one should own the means of production?
Oh, no. I'm just saying maybe it's equally divided. It just happens that the ownership of the robots are more equally distributed. Just so happens to be we're all stockholders, or rather than just these privately held corporations that own all the
Privately held large evil corporations.
Now, as far as universal basic income, would universal basic income just take care of the issue? And we could make it a very high level of universal income. If these robots are really that good, the guaranteed income we get could be equivalent to what a millionaire would have today, right? Like we could be guaranteed to go to the fanciest restaurants today and go on the best vacations and whatever.
No, you're not guaranteed to go to the fanciest restaurants, because they're also making millions of dollars, and they say, why the hell would I have to work in a restaurant?
Or wait, I won't be guaranteed to be able to go to the fanciest restaurants because why?
Because maybe the people who would be running restaurants are saying, well, I don't need to work anymore. I have $1 million a year.
But the robots will handle the whole restaurant. No one even needs to run the restaurant. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Suppose.
It could work, but I don't think it's going to be like that. I think because we would still have to figure out a system in which people get equitable sort of this distribution of assets and income, and we're not going to be there. I mean, we're still going to have sort of the same problems, which is, some people are going to have too much, some people are going to have too little, and it might be more exacerbated or not. It depends
the
on
bare minimum,
but it's not going to be like that.
Why not? Maybe the minimum that we're given could be still very, very good.
Maybe, but I don't know. I'm not an economist, but I don't think that's probably going to happen. I feel that because it's not just about material wealth. It's
No,
more about relative wealth in that
and
case.
I think
Oh,
the problem is
like,
that,
could you say
go
the
ahead.
could you say like the poor in America today, for example, are better off than the poor in other countries, or possibly even better off than like the poor from a historical perspective in the past?
That's
In a
Or
sense,
should the measure be what's possible?
in a sense you can, Carolyn, in the sense that, but it's
in
in a
absolute
kind of
terms.
in absolute, like, for example, people don't starve for the most part in the United States. So in that sense, that's a lot better than being poor in France, 200 years ago, because people would starve, right?
But happiness is very subjective.
Yes, and a lot of
Right.
things are relative. So we've become a society that has, to some extent, overcome that problem of people starving. But anything higher than that, I feel it's a lot trickier. Not that that was easy, it took us a lot of time, and but a lot of things are harder than that, because it's about relative. It's essentially what Raul was saying, right? I mean, yes, imagine you make 500 instead of 100 a, but what if the other person, instead of 2,000, they make 20,000? You're actually poorer than in the beginning, right?
Right.
Relatively,
Imagine
you
a
are even
system.
poorer. That matters a
Imagine
lot.
a system that's run, that in the way we live our life, we're living it like we treat our family. How do you treat your family? If we could create a society where we're all family, you get it? Like,
Is that possible?
so
That's
yeah, of course it's
basically what
possible.
Marx wanted.
I know nothing about
Yeah.
Marx.
So I'll tell you, that's what Marx basically thought is what we should be shooting for. It's a society, to each according to his needs, from each according to his
A
abilities,
society
his
of
or hers.
abundance,
Yeah, and
where
which
the
is
robots are doing so many things. We have more leisure time instead of a 40-hour week. I don't know, whatever it is, 10 hours maybe, we'll work. And the rest of the time we'll be creative. We'll be creating. That's what life is.
Yeah.
We will be enjoying life, you see? So we were able to do that back in as early as the 1980s. So the question is, why hasn't it happened already? We have the ability to do it. The reason is because the powers that be don't want that. They are pushing not for that to happen. So what do we do then in response? We have to get together. The people have to get together and say, no, you don't have the say in this. We have the say. And we have to use what we have, the Constitution, to exert our rights, but we're not doing that. And that is the central issue, that human beings in this country are not doing they're not responsible. And therefore, we got the mess we have. It's a direct correlation.
That's going back to the how we do it rather than sort of what we should do.
I already told you how.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. That's
You
what I'm
create
saying.
a majority.
Let's not go back there, because
No, there's not.
We're
Yeah, you
almost
already
out of
told
time.
us.
We're almost
So
out of
when you ask
Yeah.
how, what do you mean?
Oh no. I'm saying that you were saying how to do it. I'm saying that you were answering that question. Whereas we're talking about like the what, just like what would happen if robots became.
Bertrand Russell has I think most of you have probably already read that essay, but or not. I mean, but it's in Praise of Idleness is a very good essay, and it's essentially about that, and he makes an excellent case, and mind you, this is I think early 20th century when he wrote that essay. I mean, it was kind of I think it was early 20th century. It was quite a while ago. He didn't know anything about robots, obviously, but and in his world was a lot less automated than ours, but he could already see, because you could already see in the early 20th century, even late 19th century, all the machines and the way the machines were producing things instead of humans, right? So he already saw, and I mean, I'm not gonna try to say exactly what he says because it's Bertrand Russell. I probably won't even be able to make the same arguments in the same way, but it's a very good essay and kind of short. But essentially, the main idea is what you guys are describing, right? I mean, you have the means of production. That's clear. With robots, we're going to have the means of production times 100 times 1,000. I mean, the means of production are there. It's just a matter of figuring out the distribution of like the product of that production, right? So that people can actually have the free time, because we don't, like, if what he says is, it's a very simple economic equation, right? If you produce 1,000 now, right, and that's enough for you to live off of 1,000, and in 20 years from now, instead of producing 1,000, say in 8 hours, you're producing 10,000, or let's say 8,000. That would mean that to live in the same way materially, you would only need to work 1 hour instead of 8 at that point. Right. And that just makes sense. That's math. That's just basic production. Right. So it can be done. It could certainly be done. It's just the problem is finding what is the system that is going to allow us to do that in terms of distribution, right? Distribution of wealth in society. And that is certainly not the system we have now. With the system that we have now, Amazon is not going to distribute some of that money to other people, right? You're just going to have Amazon make billions and billions and billions and trillions of dollars, but that's not going to go to Raul or to Michael, right? I mean, it's just not with the system that we have now. So that's why Yang, he makes an interesting point, right? I mean, the system could work perfectly or very well. We just need to ask Amazon or Facebook. Facebook, instead of collecting the data for free, why not ask Facebook to pay a little bit of money for that data that they're collecting from you, right? And with that money, we could actually give people the UBI, right? So they can, when we have too many robots and they don't have work, they can actually buy food. It's not a radical idea if you think about it. In 20 years from now, it's really something that will make a lot of sense.
But here's the thing: if robots are really that good, then kind of like I said, a little bit of UBI might be a really high standard of living. And also, the CEO of Amazon, Bezos or whatever, at some point, if they're that high above the rest of the population, like if they want the population to like them, all they have to do is give a little bit of their wealth to each person, and that would be a really good standard of living if these robots are really that good, right? So it's kind of like,
to me, the question is should we encourage Bezos to give that, or should we take it?
Yeah, interesting. But yeah,
no, I mean, this is a little beside the point. But if he were to give it, like, how would that work logistically?
He would just say,
if you do some sort of tax, I mean, that would, you don't need to go to Bezos' house and point a gun to his head. In fact, you shouldn't, right? I mean, this is the United States. So, what you do is like you tax companies, those companies a little bit. And you pass a law saying that, they have to pay for the data.
Of course. Yeah.
But going back to, like, Bruno was talking about relative income. So we might have this really, if UBI gets enforced, we might have a really high standard of living, but it wouldn't be as good as Bezos. I don't even know what his standard of living would be. Like, what would he?
Well, he'll live in Mars at that point.
He'll live on Mars. Like at what point? Like what would he have? Like, how high of a standard of living can you get, right? So like,
well, there's a point where, and this is borne out by sociological studies, that happiness really starts how you compare to your neighbor. Well, not literally your neighbor, but how do you compare to the rest of society is really what affects how happy you are or how content you are with your standard of living. you might have a standard of living that in the third world is luxurious, but if you're living in the US and yeah, you have the same, you have your big screen TV, you have your whatever, but then you compare yourself to other people, it really can make you unhappy.
And I ran across this little factoid a few years ago. It may have changed by now, but probably not a whole lot. If you live in the United States
Mm-hmm.
and you drive a car and you have a job and a computer, you're in the top 8% of people on Earth.
Right. Yeah. But
well,
you don't
8% in terms of living standard, but you may not like the work you do, or you may
yeah, that's not really the point, but yeah, I understand what you're saying.
That's part of it, yeah.
But look,
I was saying that there's relative.
Sorry, I was just going to say very quickly, and then you can take over.
Yeah.
One way to just very simple way to understand that difference between where you are makes all the difference. Like if you drive, say, a Honda Civic here in the United States, and kind of like a newish Honda Civic, you kind of feel sort of almost on the poor side. That's my car. It's still a nice car, but if I were driving that car, in
India,
in India, for example, man, I would, no offense to India, but that would be a very, very nice car.
Or the Philippines,
or the Philippines, it's, and I would feel very good about it. Man, look at my kind of like, not brand new, but newish Honda Civic,
let me
very,
put it this
very
way.
nice, I would feel great, but I don't here, it's not, it's not that great.
Driving a Honda Civic 100 miles, the difference between that and driving a Maserati 100 miles is absolutely insignificant compared to not having a car at all.
Actually, you're going to be a little sore in the Maserati because the suspension is.
I mean, the Honda Civic is actually a very good car. I mean, it's super comfortable. I mean, it's as good as a car could get, right? I just can't go as fast as a Ferrari. Yeah. The thing is, you see that cars are all about status because, I mean, with our speed limits, it actually doesn't really matter if you have a Honda Civic or a Ferrari. You go the same speed, right? So it's about stat. I mean, it's obviously not the same thing to have a Honda Civic and a Ferrari because the status is very different.
But that's interesting because what if the level of UBI is enough where you could get anything that you could reasonably want? So any dinner you want, UBI is enough.
According to Michael Greenberg.
According to Michael Greenberg. So
anything that we could reasonably want, according to Michael Greenberg.
or anything that really any human like what if the level of UBI is enough so that I want a Honda, I want this car, I get this car. I want this dinner, I get this dinner. I want the what if you could do whatever you whatever you wanted with your UBI? Then it would be about showing off. Then it would be about doing things you don't want. You would you'd come up with things you don't actually want so that you're really, really
right.
But once you're habituated,
that's a very interesting point because the niceness of the things that you have no longer becomes a status symbol.
Yeah, exactly.
So, hey, I've got you spent half your UBI on a Maserati.
No, because what you think is you reasonable. What was your term that you could reasonably want today? You get tired of it, and then you're going to want more. That's just, I think, human nature. It's habituation and the search for novelty. After you get habituated, that's I think.
Could robots become good enough that they'll outcompete our desires and we want this dinner, they'll get us this dinner. We want this car, they'll get us this car. We want this watch, they'll get us this. I guess at some point what we want would just move to a whole nother, our desire.
Well, maybe, maybe it goes beyond material things, and that would be nice.
Like literature, like maybe your robot could have like the most creative book or something. I don't know.
And I think that can happen. I know in my younger days, I've always said, oh, I want to have a nice, fancy, fast car and whatever. And I don't feel any desire for those things anymore. It's been years since I've thought about, oh, I wish I had it would be nice if I had a Porsche, or now it's not. It's not something.
I confess I really I don't want a Ferrari because that would be too expensive, but I kind of like the Corvette, or the Camaro, and I kind of want to buy those cars, even though it's very stupid, because a Corvette is way too expensive for like what David said. I mean, it's the same to like driving Maserati and Honda Civic in terms of comfort. I mean, it's actually not going to make a difference.
So, I don't have a Maserati or a Corvette, but I do have this. And Bill Clinton, every world leader in the 1990s, no world leader in the 1990s had this much information at their fingertips.
Yeah.
That's good silver lining right there. Anyways, guys, it's kind of time. So, do you have any other things that you would like to bring up? I mean, we can start talk a little bit, if you want. If not, we can wrap it up.
Well,
I don't have a whole lot else. So yeah,
I would like to. Oh, go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything to say really. Go on.
I was just going to say I would like to suggest artificial intelligence and universal basic income as conversation topics.
Yeah, those are good ones. Yeah, we'll do those
for that. Yeah,
those are good conversations.
Someday, can we talk about Heidegger? Martin Heidegger.
Sure.
What was his philosophy? I guess
I think he's a charlatan, but
is that what you want to say?
No,
Okay.
No, I want to see if other people might be able to give me some other insights. And I mean, I haven't read him. I tried, but I said, okay, let me dial back. Yeah,
we could maybe like read an article by him or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, just try.
Post a link.
Okay.
Yeah, give us.
I'll take a look at it, because I've tried reading him and I said, no, I can't. It's just, I don't know if he's.
I mean,
he's
to be
sincere.
honest, I've never read Heidegger, but I mean, he has a big name. I mean, he's one of the big ones.
Yeah. I mean, I wish we had Frank here, but well, not in the immediate future. There's certainly more interesting topics. I just want to find out if he's a charlatan that's fooled a lot of people. Because Noam Chomsky also says, I don't think this guy is really saying anything that makes sense, just making it up, whatever. But anyway, so.
Anyways, well, thanks for the conversation and thanks for listening, you guys. And
you have a topic for next week, Bruno?
I
don't need to.
I think it's affirmative action, and which is Michael Greenberg. He suggested the topic, and I think it's next week. So we'll talk about affirmative action, and kind of a hot topic, but should be a good discussion.
If you guys want, that's just something
we'll do it, man. We'll do it. Yeah.
We don't shy away from controversy.
Good topic.
All right, thanks.
All right,
okay.
So thanks for watching, guys, and that's it from us for today. Subscribe to the channel, please.